Hari Om. We move into the second aspect of Sanatana Dharma, which is Srishti. And at the outset, let me tell you that this is not an easy topic, and I myself will certainly not give a accurate backdrop of Srishti as an idea because it requires a lot more sadhana, a lot more reading, a lot more understanding. But I think some basic outlines is what I will convey, and then people can go and refer to the detailed texts and commentaries to understand this idea better. But before I get into more details, some thought ideas are sort of interesting to comprehend. One aspect is this idea of subject and object. We are a subject and we see objects in front of us. And it is so fundamental to our own living experience that clearly there has to be an experiencer on one side, and experienced on the other side. And without these two separate aspects, an experience cannot happen. It is so obvious that we do not notice this sort of difference in subject and object in our day-to-day life. But this is very fundamental to any experience that we go through. Now, what you see on the slide here is on the right hand side an experiencer or the subject, and using the eyes, she sees a mountain. Nose is used to smell the flowers, and minerals available in various fruits and food items are consumed via mouth. Uh, Stating the obvious, probably. But the issue is this: one thing which is fascinating, not from a science lens, but more at a philosophical lens. How is it that we are able to see? How is it that we are able to eat something in nature that then becomes part of our experience? Uh, Minerals are present, calcium, zinc, iron, etc., are present outside in the universe as a sort of an object, but we consume them and then they become part of us. And interestingly, those very minerals are present within our human body also. In a sense, this leads us to wonder that what is outside is also present inside, and essentially if these two are completely distinct and separate, probably no transaction can occur. So even with sort of basic inference, one can probably fathom that there is some aspect that connects these two. In effect, both of them are made from the source material, which is the same on the both sides. If you kind of take this idea as the sort of a base and then look at another thought idea that is conveyed in this particular slide, let's take an example of what you see on the screen, that we have a bunch of people watching a Bharatnatyam dance. In a sense, you can imagine this image to represent what we experience in our physical universe itself in terms of what we see and experience in our day-to-day lives. The question that may be relevant here is, can one know everything about the people, the dance, the stage, etc., but just by looking at it or being a part of it? Similarly, can we know the universe by just living within it and observing everything all around us? Obviously, no. There is a lot more to what is happening in front of us. Behind it, a lot of story would have happened behind it for whatever we see around us to materialize. If you take this particular example, if you take me as a person sitting in the audience, even before I reach this particular stage, if you look at the subjective aspect of mine, I exist, which is the Sat aspect of me, which we referred to earlier. I have awareness, I know, I can cognize, and therefore that is the Chit aspect of my existence. And of course, I seek experience, which is fundamental to my own state of being. So these three collectively, the Satchit Anand aspect, is my own pure aspect. But that apart, in addition, I make a sankalpa. And what is that sankalpa? I make a sankalpa to seek a certain kind of experience of watching a dance concert. So that is the icha aspect that comes about, that from the moment I seek an experience, I then would like to have that experience in a certain form and manner, in this example of that of a watching a dance concert. But will ichha alone be enough? No, absolutely. I need to now have knowledge all all aspects of dances that are available, so that from that list of dances I choose one particular kind of experience, which is watching a Bharatnatyam concert, which is the jnana, is again another key element for me to seek any kind of experience. But is jnana enough? I need to then select one particular aspect of dance, which is watch a Bharatnatyam concert. So Ichha, jnana and Kriya collectively, which are forming part of the Sankalpa, is again an essential addition that needs to be added to the seeking experience, the Ananda aspect, for me to go about looking around and experiencing aspects of the world. So these six, 3 plus 3, would have to have happened in the background before I even land up at the dance concert. But hold on, is that enough? Equally, on the objective side, there has to be a demand that I have created on the subjective side needs to be met, and that demand is met on the objective side. So, which is why there needs to be a concert at a certain time and location. There needs to be a dancer who's willing to perform. There must be other people who are also willing to watch the dance concert at this particular point of time, living in my own area. And of course, the access to the concert should be available, and there could be many more sort of objective aspects. What I'm attempting to drive here is that there is a lot of drama that has to happen before this particular conception of the dance concert really materializes. Simply put, there are various layers of personality in the individuals, which effectively must have happened in the backdrop for them to come together. Similarly, there are multiple layers in the objective aspect for that also to kind of get set up for both of them to come together, both of them to have a samyoga. If you take this thought example as a sort of a backdrop to understand the fact that there's a lot more to what you are seeing in front of you, that then sets us well into getting into this idea of Srishti. Now, it looks like a busy slide. It is busy, no doubt. But hopefully, if we kind of take this further, we should be able to understand this better. So, there are two layers, as we mentioned, subject and the object. Now, what this slide is showing is the creation or projection that happens on the side of the subject, which means that the same aspects of Satya, which we referred to earlier, all of them collectively come together, and sort of a cosmic egg, Hiranyagarbha or Brahmanda, materializes, which is composed of not just the Panchabhuta, Triguna, and Mula Prakriti, but there is another element that is added here, which is Vasana. Now, Vasana or Samskara is again an idea that we will cover in slightly later slides. At this point of time, all I will say is that the collective karma of all the living beings that has accumulated and is waiting to get fulfilled. What happens is at the start of the universe, as per the texts like Yogasutra and Bhagavad Gita and many other texts, the collective vasanas of all living beings form the seed for the Brahmanda to expand and express itself in the way it has happened all around us. So, in a sense, creation is not seen as a random outburst without any reason. The reason, the form, the shape, all of it is determined by the collective vasana, because collective vasana or karma is the demand which is created, and the demand is met by the physical universe, which is on the Brahmanda aspect. So, this is the basis in which Shastras have seen creation to have come about. So, Ishvara effectively plants the seeds of Vasana into the Mula Prakriti, and diversity then comes about in the universe on account of Triguna, and physicality comes about on account of Panchabhuta. So therefore, Satya in essence is the foundation which allows the creation to happen, and that becomes the starting point. Now, if you come to the level of individual, and you take any living being, not just human being, though I have used that as an example, any living being will have all these sorts of subparts that are shown on this particular slide, though they may be in varying states of intensity. So, if you take a human being, for example, one aspect of our own living experience is the aspect through which we gain knowledge about the universe. These are the centers of knowledge, and Shastras express various aspects which come together. So, starting with Buddhi, Then ahankara, which is the I-ness, buddhi is the intellect, mind is mana, smriti is memory. These are the sort of four sukshma or subtle aspects that get formulated first. After that, more grosser aspects, grosser than buddhi ahankara, but still subtle enough, which is the pancha gyanendriya come about, which is chakshu, prana, srotra, rasana, and twak. Twak representing skin, srotra is hearing, chakshu is seeing, prana is respiration, rasana is mouth and taste. Now, effectively, what is being conveyed here is that the sattva aspect within Mula Prakriti is the trigger which gets converted within living beings to create what are called as centers of knowledge. What you see in blue here is the Devata aspect, which means behind every aspect of uh, seeing, hearing, etc., there is a presiding deity called the Devata. In a sense, Devata, you can call it as Devata is wrongly translated as God, but Devata is effectively the impulse of knowing, seeing, listening, etc. It's the primary impulse, which then leads to the Indriya like Chakshu, Prana, Srutru to come about, which is the power of seeing, the power of hearing, etc. And those in turn go further down and they become grossified. So rajas, then if you move from sattva to rajas, there you see vak, which is sound, pani, which is the aspect of grasping, which is present within us to take control of, to taste, take, to seize, so to speak. That's one aspect within our persona. Uh, Upastha, which is procreation, Payu is locomotion, and Gudendriyam, which is elimination of waste. These together with Panchaprana, which is Prana, Apana, Udana, Samana, and Vyana, these are triggered from a creation perspective by the Rajas aspect, which is present in Mula Prakriti. So these are the centers of action within living beings, again, not just humans, which then further gets grossified. And tamas aspect, because tamas effectively represents grossifying or condensation of creation. So what was subtle earlier from the sattva and rajas perspective, they only become grossified. And the first aspect of uh, creation which tamas does is to create the five aspects of tanmatra, which is shabda, sparsha, rasa, rupa, and gandha, which is smell, touch, taste, form, and smell. And then the five the Mahabhuta, which is Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Apa, and Prithvi come about. Now, note that there is a distinction between Panchabhuta, which I referred to earlier as part of Satya, which is a more subtler aspect, and they become grossified into via a process called Panchikarana. And what come about are the space, heat, liquidity, etc., the five Mahabhuta that come about. And these then collectively mix together and create the whole variety of shapes and forms in the universe, as well as various kinds of living beings. Now, this gradation from Sukshma, which is subtle, to Sthula is how the Veda has conceived creation as happening on the side of subject, which is at the level of Pindanda. On the bottom right, you see this idea again repeated just to reinforce that the Deva aspect is the subtlest aspect, the impulse to see, hear, etc., which is the first aspect of creation, which in turn leads to the power of seeing, which is the aspect of Indriya, which then leads to the tamas aspect getting formulated, which is the physical eyes, nose, tongue, and skin coming about, hands, etc. That physicality, those physical apertures are called golaya. Now, these three, which is Deva, Indriya, and Golaya, together then experience a Vishaya, which is like a samosa, mountain, etc. So, this is the whole scheme of things, or expansion, or creation, or projection happening at the level of Pindanda. But as we mentioned earlier, this side, which is the subjective side, is more a demand creation side, which is demand created by the vasana or samskara or previous karma of the particular living being. That creates the demand, that creates a behavior pattern, and that pattern then needs an object so that that pattern gets fulfillment. And therefore, what you see is again Srishti happening at the level of Brahmanda, which is again the same aspects, which is Ishvara, Panchabhuta, Triguna, etc., coming together. And the same core material is used to formulate what is called as the Brahmanda aspect. So, what was referred to as Buddhi earlier at the level of Pindanda is referred to as Mahat at the level of Brahmanda. What is referred to as Ahankara at the level of Pindanda is referred to as Virat at the level of Brahmanda. And then all the subsequent aspects that were covered earlier at the level of individual also get manifested at the level of the universe also, which is precisely the reason why rishis have stated within our own Shastra that if you know yourself at the level of Pindanda, then you know pretty much the entire universe, because what you are is just a mini copy of what is the whole universe expression itself. So that's the way it is conceived. Universe coming together, the same elements leading to creation on the side of subject, and the same elements coming together and creating at the side of object. And that is the reason why we are able to cognize the universe. We are able to have an experience. Both sides are not unknown to each other, both of them are known to each other. There are no smells outside the gandha that I can experience as a subject. And if there are some smells, they may be just more gradation in terms of subtlety. But the idea of smell has to be fundamentally present, not just within me, but even with on the side of the object. And that is the reason why experience can happen together. So if this aspect is understood, one can even probably understand some of the fascinating stories that one comes across. So if you read the story of the birth of Ganesha, one will then come across this idea that Uma made Ganesha from mud. That's what the story says. Now one can step back and say, okay, mud may mean Mula Prakriti. Yeah, and Mula Prakriti is used to formulate and create Ganesha, but that Mula Prakriti alone cannot uh, is not alone adequate. It needs to have Ishvara within it. A seat of experiencer also has to happen within Ganesha. Otherwise, it's like a mechanical robo, which is the reason why Shiva also had to intervene and then replace the neck with that of an elephant, which has its own symbology and story, which we will not get into. But both the Purusha aspect, which is Sachidananda Swarupa, as well as the Prakriti aspect, both of them have to come together, is what in a sense that story is also conveying. Which is why again I'm saying that unless one knows Srishti in its basic formulation, apart from the details that are conveyed in the Shastra, many of the stories of the Purana also may become unclear. And is this idea unique to some Shastra? And I have just reproduced here some shloka from the seventh chapter of the Gita, where Krishna also says that I have a lower nature. He calls it Apara Prakriti, which is what is called as Ashtadha, which is eightfold division of Apara Prakriti, which is Panchabhuta, which is earth, water, fire, etc., apart from mind, intellect, and ego, which is Mana, Buddhi, and Ankara. This Sri Krishna calls as Apara Prakriti, but he also says in the third shloka here, know that all being, sorry, in the second shloka it says, this is my lower nature, which is the Ashtadha aspect, but there is an higher nature of mine, which is Para Prakriti, which is the life principle, Jiva Bhutam as it is called, which is Sachidananda aspect of Satya that we referred to earlier. Now, these two collectively come together, and Krishna says that whole of the universe is nothing else but a mixture of these two coming together, and that is all strung around me like a string of pearls. So, this idea keeps coming again and again. Now, what you see on this particular slide is again a hierarchy from Sukshma to Sthula is what we referred to earlier. This slide reverses the order. It talks about Sthula to Sukshma, which is that the most gross aspect of universe that we experience is like a table, samosa, clothes, mountains, etc. They are gross, they can be seen. They are the most sthula aspect, which are referred to as vishaya or the objects. But more sukshma than vishaya is tanmatra, more sukshma than tanmatra is karmendriya, more than karmendriya is prana, jnanendriya, mana, asmita, buddhi, and most sukshma of all is the purusha. Now, why is this gradation important? Is this just theory? Absolutely not. The idea is this, and as we get into later slides, you'll realize that journey of a yogi is to develop concentration abilities into what is the sthula aspects, which is a yogi may concentrate on a table, for example. But as the yogi is able to master the ability to concentrate or do dhyana on a table, that process will lead the yogi to go deeper and then experience something which is more sukshma than the table, which is tanmatra, then it goes to karmendriya, prana, etc. And this is the progress of yoga. And as yoga gets deeper and deeper, then one will eventually attain the state of doing dhyana on one's own state of purusha. Now, what is important to understand is that not only this slide is important to understand the journey of yoga, what one also needs to understand as that as one gets the ability to do dhyana on something which is more and more sukshma, then one is able to know more and more, because you know more about any product if you know what are the source ingredients that is made of. And if you know more about the ingredients that you made of, then you know more and more about the elements that compose the ingredients, which is possibly elements from the periodic table. The more you know more about the elements from the periodic table, the more you know about the atom structure, proton, electron arrangement that makes up. Then you go into subatomic particles. If you see, the same journey happens even from the perspective of science, and it's the same element, the same idea that is reflected here from the perspective of yoga also, that the more you go deeper and deeper from your perspective of dhanya, then you know more and more, and eventually you'll reach a state when you will know everything. Yeah, so I will pause this particular video because it's possibly slightly long already, but this backdrop is essential. But the idea of Srishti is not over. There is a lot more to talk about. So I will pause this video for now, and we will move to the next video after you're able to digest this particular video. So thank you. Hari Om.